The trade war between the U.S. and China escalates. Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott now calling upon the SEC to delist Chinese companies. Joining us in an exclusive interview to discuss this and so much more. It's his first time speaking out since leaving office. Former SEC Chair Gary Gensler. Gary, great to have you on the broadcast. And I'll start with what Rick Scott is talking about. How do you feel about the role of the SEC being used in the way that Rick Scott is effectively asking for?
First, it's great to be back with you, Andrew and Joe. I miss Becky, but good to see you, Kelly, and all of your viewers. Look, it's a privilege to be in the U.S. markets. We have the deepest, most liquid markets. They've been very choppy recently, as you know, because of all the policy uncertainty. But China, for 20 years, was not really following our rules. But we were successful in a bipartisan way with Senator Rick Scott. He and I used to talk on occasion about this, with a lot of success with other senators as well, negotiating with China that they behaved and they followed the rules. And we treated China with respect but with firmness. And as long as I was there, they entered into a 50-page agreement, and they have been abiding by those agreements.
So, Gary, you've negotiated with the Chinese before. To the extent that you can try to put your head in their head, how do you see all of this playing out as it relates to tariffs?
I spent a lot of time with their Ministry of Finance and their senior financial regulators, and I think it's not going to end well, Andrew. I think it's going to be a bit of a quagmire. My experience is that they're tough negotiators, don't get me wrong, and they're looking out for their advantage. But the best way to handle that situation is to be consistent, to be honorable and treat them with dignity, and to take the toughest messages private and one-on-one. And I will tell you this, when they see inconsistency in policy, they tend to veer back. They lean back and they don't like to engage. And they sort of think that time is on their side. I'm not saying it always is, but that's how they think, is time's on their side and they can outweigh the volatility of the policy on the other side. So that's why consistency, respect, but yes, firmness is important.
In terms of leverage, to the extent we have any, how important is it to go to them with allies? Trump, Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, they're meeting with the Japanese today. To the extent that the U.S. can form some kind of deals with a handful of countries, does that change the dynamic? And do you think, I mean, as it relates to our other allies, that if you're Canada right now or you're the EU, that you're going to say, sure, I'll make a deal with you and I'll pay your tariff, as it relates to then going and working against the Chinese?
Look, I get on some level that, of course, elections have consequences, and this president wants to adjust our trade relations around the globe, that it's been non-reciprocal trade and wants to balance it up. But doing an all-of-the-above strategy, trying to do it with 150 or 200 countries and doing it so aggressively and so jarringly at one time is like a home field goal, a self-inflicted injury. I do think allies are deeply important, as you said, but I don't think it's going to be that easy. I think 90 days to kind of negotiate with dozens of countries, big consequential agreements, and then China's watching all this. And don't forget the real instability for businesses and thinking about their investments. They're pulling back. They have to be much more careful about their investments. And then don't forget about the deep instability in the stock market and the U.S. Treasury markets. And those are some of our considerations, of course, as our economy weakens and our markets are far more uncertain.
Let me ask you a different question. There has been lots of not just speculation, but we'll call it speculation for now, about potentially folks in Washington, government officials, maybe people in the administration, maybe others, I don't know, and whether they have been trading on or have been aware of things that this administration might be trying to do as it relates to tariffs? You're somebody who ran the SEC. You and I have talked about this topic at great length. I always thought that it would be great for the SEC to look at these things because I thought there's a way to create credibility for the government. I think you've always felt that it was harder for the SEC to do it because effectively your budget is set by Congress.
Well, Andrew, I think our capital markets work best when the public, the investors, think that nobody else has an edge. I mean, they might do better research, but they don't have an insider information edge. And that's critical. And I think trusting government similarly. And I think it's really critical that folks don't trade on inside information, particularly those, whether it be in Congress or be in the executive branch or the judiciary. That's a really critical thing. Yes, the Securities and Exchange Commission from time to time investigates government officials, whether it be in the judiciary, Congress, or executive, about insider trading. They're hard investigations, but I do think it's really critical to our confidence in our government and our confidence in the markets.
So when you see news that somebody like Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene disclosed that she ended up purchasing tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock on April 8th and 9th, this is the day before President Trump made the announcement pausing the global tariffs, and then also bought it looks like, dumped some Treasury bonds during this period. What do you think? And do you think that the SEC should be investigating what government officials are doing? Does knowing what the president may or may not do constitute inside information?
Well, I'm not going to comment on any one member of Congress and anyone.
You're not the head of the SEC. You can say whatever you want.
But I'm going to say what I want here. Okay. I think it would be best for the American public, and Congress has considered this over the years, to actually take a real look, Congress take a real look, and self-impose some restrictions. We at the Securities and Exchange Commission self-imposed. We went beyond the government ethics rules and self-imposed on ourselves restrictions on people like myself or Paul Atkins, who's going to take the honor and the oath of office shortly, to trade on individual securities. We weren't able to do that. I think that's a way to better instill confidence in your government and in the markets, and then you wouldn't have these questions about individual members of Congress.